all of the challenges that you have faced, that you're currently facing, and that you will face in the future are happening to push you towards your higher self. These things are happening for you and not to you. These are the things that help you grow, overcome those hurdles, up level, and self-actualize as you move towards your higher self. And once you're through them and you've had some space and some time, you can look back on those times and see the lessons and the gift that they were, because they helped you move forward into the person that you are becoming and that you are today. And I wanted to illustrate this idea with my own examples. And so you may know, if you've been around on the channel for a while, that I quit my corporate job of 10 years. I used to be a civil engineer for 10 years and I quit. And leading up to being able to quit corporate, I felt like I went through a lot of different challenges and changes. And now that I have some time and space away from those experiences, I can really see how they were all pushing me towards my higher self. And I want to share them with you today to give you some examples and some ideas so that you can reflect on your own challenges and see how they were happening to push you to be your higher self as well. And as I think about this example, it can be split into kind of two phases. So the phase that I just exited was my leaving corporate phase, and I had all those challenges that helped me ultimately grow into the person who was ready to leave corporate and who ultimately did leave corporate. And now I feel like I'm in my, newbie entrepreneur phase, the, business building, figuring out that sort of stuff phase. And those will have its own set of challenges that, I'm still going through it right now. I haven't quite integrated that yet, but in the future, I'll be able to look back on this time that I'm in right now and see all those lessons and the way that it helped me grow. So let's look at the examples and the lessons from my leaving corporate phase. This all really started back in 2016 when I was laid off. This was quite a shock to me, a shock to my system. It was a very stressful time financially. I felt like I had car payments, I had a mortgage, I was worried about, how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to get my next job? Things like that. When am I going to run out of money? It was a stressful time. But looking back, I can really see how, the positive side of that is that it really planted the seed for entrepreneurship in my mind. After that experience, I was adamant that I at least wanted to have a side hustle. I didn't want to be without options. I didn't want this to happen again in the future and have nothing to fall back on. And at the time I thought, if I at least have a side hustle that I work a couple hours a week, if I was ever to get laid off again, I could fall back on that, increase my hours, and have that to kind of float me along. So the way this pushed me into my higher self was it really got me out of kind of the autopilot that I was on in a corporate job, and it really got me thinking in a whole new way. Prior to this happening, I had zero desire to be an entrepreneur. I did not want to have my own business or anything like that. And after it happened, I knew that I wanted to have something that would be my own, that I could fall back on. And so it really planted that seed and got my mind thinking in a whole new way. I also think it happened to get me unstuck from a job that I otherwise would have had a very hard time leaving. I felt very comfortable at that job, even though I wasn't happy going to work every day. And I actually spent a decent amount of time looking at grad programs, and I was thinking about getting a master's. And I think that this was the universe's way of stepping in and saying, you're not getting another master's. Don't do any more education or don't put any more energy into this engineering path. You're going to start to think about entrepreneurship. And so it really got me out of that mode and helped me start to move forward. The next challenge that came along came in the form of the next job that I was able to get. So about 4 months after being laid off, I was able to secure a position that was almost a carbon copy of my last position. And at the time, I wasn't really thinking like I was unhappy before, I'm probably going to be unhappy now. I was thinking, I just need to get a job. I was very stressed financially, and I just wanted to make sure that I had money coming in so that I wouldn't miss any important payments. And of course, the challenge of that time was that I was, again, unhappy, unfulfilled in the work I was doing. And it kind of compounded because at this new job, I had a new project manager that was just not a fit for me. They were not the vibe that I was on, and I was having a really bad time with them. And that kind of gave me the push to be able to be open to any other opportunities. Normally, I would not have been looking for any new job or been open to new opportunities so short after getting a new job, because they say, stay with a job for a couple of years so that it looks good on your resume, blah, blah, blah. And so I was really in that mindset. But being so unhappy at this new position opened me up to being open to looking at my dream job when a friend at the time sent me the job posting. And I was like, you know what? I don't care about this job that I'm in. I'm very unhappy. I'm going to look at it. This looks like my dream job. Why not? I'm just going to go for it. And I think that this all happened to really open me up to that, because before I would have been like, well, I just started this new job. Like, for context, I had started the new job like 2 months before that application was sent to me. And so there was no way that I normally would have been looking to get a new job so quickly. That would have made me look really flaky. It would have looked bad for future employers, blah, blah, blah. But the challenge really turned into growing me because I was open to looking at new possibilities. And so I ended up getting that new job that I applied for, and I ended up leaving that company 5 months after I started, which I felt pretty bad about, but this was a really big move for me. I was moving to another province. I live in Canada, so we have provinces, and I was moving to a new city, and this was a position that on paper was going to be my dream engineering job. And so I had started to get the feeling that, maybe engineering just isn't for me. And I had told myself that I was going to pursue this dream position. And I said, if it's going to be engineering, then this job is going to work for me. And if it isn't engineering, then I'll know. And so pretty soon after I started that new position in the new city, I was pretty quickly unhappy with things again and feeling stressed by work and burnt out. And so again, that was the challenge that came along. That was a very challenging time. And it became very clear to me engineering was no longer the career path for me. And so the challenge at that time was work was very stressful to go to. I was feeling very burnt out. I had very little energy, and just emotionally, I was at the point where I was so stressed all the time that I found it harder to emotionally regulate myself. And so there were just like a lot of things that made this a very challenging, stressful time for me. And the lesson in that was finally being able to admit that engineering was not going to work out for me, and that I didn't need a new job. I didn't need to go back to school for a master's degree. What I really needed was to quit this job, quit this career, and move on to my next career path. And I think that the other positive sides of this whole change happening is in moving to a new city, I was really able to become more of myself. So even though the job was challenging, I was meeting new people. I didn't have the expectation of old friends and old families and the expectations that come along with, who you kind of have been your whole life. Like if you really want to change yourself as a person or grow into who you're going to be as a person, then moving to a new city where no one knows you and no one has expectations can be really great. And so I feel like at that time I was able to really grow as a person. I happened to meet my partner at that city, which I'm not sure if that ever would have happened if I hadn't moved. And I was also really able to develop more of my entrepreneurial mindset. So I went from thinking I just want a side hustle to really thinking, no, I'm ready to be fully self-employed. And so all of that came out of this really challenging time at work for me. And so the last struggle or challenging time in my leaving corporate phase was the struggles with side hustling. So once I knew that I was ready to leave corporate, my plan was to save up money, pay down my debt, and start to side hustle so that I could start to build my business before I left my job. And then I would be able to kind of go from there, build it up. And I had a lot of struggles in side hustling. I was really confused about what direction to go. And I also just struggled with, confidence and doing new things and, everything that comes with becoming an entrepreneur. It will really stretch you and grow you as a person. And you'll really be able to see all the ways that you are holding yourself back and all the areas that you need to grow. And so there were definitely a lot of challenges with the side hustling, but all of those challenges grew me as a person. They grew my confidence in putting myself out there. They grew my confidence in my ability to sell a product or sell a service. And I got my first experience with, critical feedback from people in the form of reviews and stuff. And so that's stuff that you are not exposed to when you work in a 9-to-5 job. And so all of that was really great. And I made a whole video about the ways in which side hustling prepared me for entrepreneurship. And I can link it up here if you're interested. And so just that whole time was teaching me the business skills and really pushing me to become my higher self, and the higher self in the form of, someone who is no longer a 9-to-5 employee mindset, but someone who can really take on building a business and be self-employed. And one of the big ways that this side hustling phase really grew me was in my identity. My identity had been so wrapped up in being an engineer, being someone who was logical, being a 9-to-5 employee. This phase, while challenging, also allowed me to grow into a new identity, multiple new identities, because I had multiple side hustles and each of those was its own little sub-identity. And so if you're wanting to make change in your life in any way, changing your identity and how you see yourself and how you ultimately present yourself to the world is going to be a big component of that. It's so uncomfortable. I remember when my first side hustle was photography, and I was so shy and so nervous to tell people that I'm doing a photography side hustle now. Even though everyone kind of knew I was into photography, just telling people that I was doing that as a business thing felt very nerve-wracking. And so that was a push outside of my comfort zone to even just admit that to myself, and then start admitting it to others. And then of course I tried on different identities as I did different side hustles, but all of this helped me really see myself as more than a 9-to-5 employee, more than an engineer, and capable of doing whatever I set my mind to. So I hope this can give you something to think about, some context for all those challenges that you went through. Maybe you can look back on them, and yes, there's nothing wrong with admitting that those were challenging times, but you can also look back and think, what were the lessons? How did I grow? How did that push me towards my higher self, which is just a new phase, the next level, the next version of yourself. And so I hope this video was helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're into this type of content, consider subscribing for weekly videos like this. And with that, I will see you next week.